So guys, there's a situation going on in Texas. Very small undercard match. Okay, I'm gonna try to set the table for you. Undercard match. Two jobbers whose careers are headed nowhere, go and punch and kick at each other for 15 minutes, right? You understand how this goes. Scores come in, two judges give it the way that the viewing audience believed it was going to go. Another judge named Fuller had it different. He had it 29-28. That's not a bad thing. That is absolutely not a bad thing. That is doing the role that you were supplied. It's simple math. You got a 10-9 must system. You turn your cards in, you add it up. But Joe Rogan made a comment. And Joe Rogan, who was working with Cormier and Anik, said, someone needs to talk to that guy. What's he taken? I'm 98% quoting there. Okay? What's he taken or what's he on? It was, you've heard that comment. It's an expression. It's not to actually literally suggest that the guy is on a medication or alcohol. All right. So, fine. I mean, you move on with your life. The two other judges got it the way that we all believe it should have gone. The right guy won, is what I'm suggesting. Fuller offered a different perspective. Very good thing for a judge to do. Now, a judge should never do that just to do that. He should always be scoring it the way that he has. But it's a very appropriate thing for a judge to offer something different. I use that word offer. I come from the world of wrestling. In amateur wrestling, we have three judges. Now, they don't look at a round. It's a point system. But for every single point that is scored within a round, you will have three judges. Two of them must agree. And Rick Kushi, the head official, this is not the same thing. MMA and wrestling is not the same thing. I'm suggesting this for you when I use the word offering. Rick Kushi, who is the head official of the United States of America, encourages the second judge to go to offer something different than the first judge. They will go in order. One judge puts up his points, another puts up his points, another comes in, is the tiebreaker. Offer. If it's at all a dispute, if it's at all a question, whether this could have been 2 or this could have been 4, offer something different than he did so the third judge can come in and solve it. That is how the head official of wrestling has instructed wrestling for the last 3 decades. Now, Fuller came out and he spoke about this. He did a YouTube piece. And this is the second time, specifically in Texas, that somebody pushed back, and it wasn't consecutive. The first time was Fitzaev versus Bobby Green, which went opposite of what the crowd thought that they saw, and one judge specifically, and he spoke up about it, and it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Now, you may not like this. You may not like that the judges are to remain quiet. You might not like that. But it's for very good reason, and it's very much in hand with sport in itself. Allow me to explain. So we don't hear from the referees and we don't hear from the judges, and there's only been a couple in the history of our sport that have navigated that. Mark Goddard comes to mind. Mark Goddard openly has a media presence in England, but he's very thoughtful. He's very accurate. He shares what it is they're looking for. He does not come in with opinion. It is never personalized. And Mark Goddard is the one guy who's never stepped in a landmine. He's never stepped in a grenade. He's never upset the media, the fans, the promotion, or the legislative body. Big John McCarthy, who was, of course, an anomaly because he was the Jedi. He was the godfather of the Thulta. He had to speak. He had to speak or nobody could learn anything, right? But there's very few. And for a judge to speak out, this is bad. It's just bad. It's just bad form. And when the judge spoke out, and see, this is an inner thing. Everybody thinks that they're the show. You'll never get around that in show business. I've had my little fun on set before, or a little movie over here. It doesn't matter what role you have in a movie. It does not matter if you're wardrobe. It doesn't matter if you're in catering. It doesn't matter. Everybody's the director. Everybody wants to be. Making a television show was one of the hardest things in the world. You will have 30 people. You need 3 smart people to make a show. Everybody else needs to be nice. That's how it works. Nobody understands that. Everybody's got a script. Everybody's hustling. Everybody wants one of their contributions put in on film that they can go back and say, I did that. Instant gratification. I think we understand that. It truly is one of these, it's instant gratification. If you have a suggestion in some form of art and it gets captured and it makes it past the edit, that's a pretty exciting thing. Very hard to control. But people will always do that. We've seen cutmen that are no longer cutmen in the UFC that don't know why they're not there anymore. We have personnel and organizers within Bellator and the Ultimate Fighting Championship that are no longer there. They were great people. They put in a lot of time, but they also don't know why they're no longer there. And they're no longer there because the camera started rolling and they started to want to see themselves on camera. And when you have a producer who is specifically pushing certain talent in his broadcast window that he's paid a small fortune to do, it's his product. And if you start yelling, or you start wearing certain things, or you got your name on the back of your shirt and you're trying to build some kind of a brand, it becomes a problem. And you got to navigate that. It's very tough because you're going to have those compulsions. I bring this to you because Fuller came out. Now, I would never give Fuller a hard time. Got to have judges. Man's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He saw what he saw and it was unpopular. I think there's an honor in that. I think there's an honor in being the unpopular side. And if you can sit down after the fact and either justify what you saw or say, got that one wrong. We're all good. We're all good and you can come on back. As long as you're objective, you understand the rules, you do the best that you can. I mean, that really is how it works. These guys get too big, right? All of a sudden they're on TV. All of a sudden that's their name. We must have them. They're an important part. They're greatly underpaid and they're not thanked. That's the deal. If you don't like that, please move to the other side of the apron, buy a ticket, and watch as a fan. You're not going to participate. This is the deal. No matter how wonderful that sounds or how unfair that sounds. Now, before you think that isn't right, for an official to not have his constitutional right of freedom of speech, before you think that, guys, it's the same way in sports, but for the athlete. I came through the NCAA, who's the scum of the earth, but in all fairness, it's one of the most respected athletic organizations and governing bodies in history. I came through as a wrestler. If I speak to the referee, I could be disqualified. I, at a minimum, will lose a team point. If I speak, I could say, hello, sir. I could say, you look very nice today. If I speak, at a minimum, I'm losing a team point. So I'm only bringing that to you because before you think this is unfair to do to our officials, somebody's speaking about the official and the official doesn't have the right to speak back. Before you say that, I just want to remind you, and maybe it'll change your opinion, that's the way it works in reverse for the athletes. The athlete in the ring, unsportsmanlike conduct, you could see that right in the octagon. We don't generally see that, right? It's a cage fight and we all kind of get it. But you could. It's within the rules. There was an obscene hand gesture, which is very common within our industry. And the gentleman was fined as $5,000, a meaningful amount of his purse, but it equaled $5,000. That just happened. That wasn't even a verbal communication. And he didn't fight it. It's right there in the bylaw. Can't do that. I'm just sharing for you, before you think that's very unfair that Joe Rogan would go to the world and make a comment that would disparage somebody, and it's not fair that he can't speak up. Before you think that, make sure that you understand the rules in all sport. It doesn't matter if it's Brett Favre. It doesn't matter if it's this Tom Brady guy. There's rules with you cannot speak to an official. It goes both ways. I'm just sharing that with you before you form your opinion. Now, I didn't have a big problem with Fuller with what he said. I knew it was bad form. I knew this was going to be a problem. You come in, you slap a guy on the wrist. You got to see this ever so often. We generally put about 10 years in between it. It was a little bit of a surprise just that it was Texas and it was back to Texas and it was only separated by about 18 months, about 12 months. I would have thought that ripple went through. And Fuller had even said things, right? When a guy says, I probably shouldn't be saying this, right? Whenever you catch yourself saying that, yeah, for sure, stop. Not to mention it wasn't live. It was recorded. And a second thing, he posted it. Not the biggest deal. I don't want anybody to come down on Fuller. But if we're doing it from this high-handed approach, each word that you say is going to matter. He started this by saying, Joe Rogan, you are my hero. Well, let me stop you right there. I like Joe as much as the next. What do you mean Joe Rogan's your hero? What part of it? What part? That he's got a really big podcast and made a bunch of money? That's what your hero is? Or are you also a dope smoking comic? I mean, in all fair, what do you mean he's your hero? That was a little bit problematic for me. He had me at Jump Street when I find out he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. I saw an honor in the fact that he had it different than 2 other judges and was willing to stand up. But you're my hero. What are you talking about? What do you mean he's your hero? I saw that as a problem. Because they're, just in all fair, I'm not giving Joe a hard time. In all fair, he's your hero. What are you talking about? What aspect is it that you aspire, aside from he's famous and rich? Aside from he's got a big voice, is that all it takes to be your hero? So all of a sudden, the guy that I thought was taking an opposing position with a black belt and a level of expertise, and even had the balls to come out and speak out, by God, if they're going to pull me or not, this is the right thing to do. That's your hero? I mean, now you just lost me again. Or do you mean you're a really popular guy and I still like you and I don't want you to rebuke me, so let me pay you a compliment in the first place? Because either way, you've weakened yourself. Of everything that he said, that was my biggest problem. Truly. You're still my hero. I mean, are you arguing with the guy who just said you needed talking to and implied, even in joking fashion, that you were under the influence? Are you arguing with him or are you shining his nuts? I mean, if you're tickling his balls and that's what we're doing here, are we talking about the match or are we talking about the fact that you're a subscriber to the podcast? And that part got weird. And it's not the easiest position, but it's a very important position. It's very, very important that this is followed. It's a very hard thing to enforce. Hey, tell somebody not to come speak out. You try to show them the bad parts of this. Joe Rogan made that kind of the foggiest idea that his name was Fuller, and I would never know. No, of course, he thinks, right, in his bubble, he thinks that this is a really big deal. I don't know what a Fuller is, guys. I don't know if it's a first name or a last name. I don't know if he got flown in from Hawaii or he was a local guy you didn't have to spring for a plane ticket in the hotel for, and he's right there from Texas. I mean, I simply don't know, but I never would, and neither would you. Neither would you. It didn't need a rebuke. It's one of these things where you get close and all of a sudden you think you're the show. It's a very natural part. It's really something you have to be aware of and you have to fight. But it's still meaningful for the position because don't forget, ultimately, these events are gamed on. Ultimately. That's the absolute highest point that you get to in terms of why there is government regulation in the first place. There is no country in the world, aside from communist countries, where government oversees sport, except in the United States and only in combat. And I'm sharing with you historically why. Ultimately, these are bet on. So you must have an objective, unbiased, disinterested, unemotional third party known as a judge. You must. And if you come out and you can be got to, if you can be ruffled, if somebody can get to you, you now taking yourself out of the category of unbiased, disinterested third party known as a judge. And when people are gaming, you now have to be removed from the seat. I'm just sharing with you, whether you like it or not, that's the way that it is. This isn't the end of Fuller, by any means. It's a learning lesson. I was on his side. I'm not really against him. I mean, the fact is, he's coming up with the short end of the stick here, but this is small. This is small stuff. Joe Rogan's your hero. Come on. Grow up.